Well, thank you very much. I'm really delighted, if not honored, to be speaking here to you today. We're going to talk about clean tech, and the question, has the time to invest finally come? Well, that's a little bit of a leading question because it would automatically suggest that the time had not come in the past. In other words, that there was no money to be made. I'll validate that notion and show you how it is that the world of energy has evolved over the course of the last 20, 30 years, especially energy finance. In answer to that question, it's a qualified yes. The time has come. There are a set of conditions that have come together that would suggest that clean tech is really ready to invest in. But really, the question is, what is clean tech? What is clean tech? And we want to explore that a little bit. Well, has the time finally come? Again, as I said, it sort of implies that the time had not come in the past. The magazine cover on the front, New Breakthrough Electric Cars, from my eclectic museum of energy artifacts that I've collected over the course of the last 25 years. And indeed, here is the museum piece, Popular Science from 1971. The Voltaire was invented by Dr. Robert Aronson. It had tripolar cobalt batteries. The car claimed to go 90 miles per hour and had a range of 300 miles per hour. It only sold 60 versions, or 60 units. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons was the timing was off. 1971 was before the oil price shocks, 1973 and 79. Dr. Aronson still alive, but candidly, he ain't no Elon Musk. Elon Musk has got tremendous amount of bravado and push and ability to raise money. The company didn't have enough money. And of course, tripolar cobalt batteries were far too expensive to be adopted. The conditions were just not right to adopt electric vehicles. It's important to know also another important, subtle but very important point in terms of the timing. And that was that the incumbent did have to deal with a lot of environmental issues at the time. The incumbent being the internal combustion engine and the oil industry. We had, if you are as old as me, smog, acid rain, leaded gasoline, and all sorts of other environmental issues of the day, which were toxic. The industry rose to those challenges, and effectively, the clean tech of the day cleaned up the emissions from smog and those sorts of things. So the incumbent innovated, in a sense, to defend its market share and leave the others out of the business, such as the Voltaire. Today, we have a new era. Yes, I do drive one. I've been driving one for 3 years. They're awesome vehicles. I think the time has finally come, but there are questions to be asked in terms of, is there money to be made, and where is the money to be made in terms of the clean tech sector, and what is the ultimate adoption profile? We also know that the cost profile, and I will show you, of things like wind and solar and so on have come down dramatically. They are definitely making a mark in the energy complex. The notion is that this is going to be a substitution of electrification and into the oil and gas business, and there's going to be a similar type of substitution as many of us in the room in the tech business believe, such as the displacement of DVD players with, say, a Netflix subscription. Well, let's hold on a minute, because this is a rather poor comparison, and I don't have time to go into all the different things, but let me just tell you that at the peak, total global sales of home entertainment was $20 billion per year. If you want to try and put the oil business, only oil, not gas, oil business, plus the automobile combustion engine business out of business, you are trying to displace an industry that is $6 trillion per year. 6 trillion. It's not even comparable in size. And the assumption is that that $6 trillion industry cannot innovate and cannot be cleaned up. That is a notion that is now being challenged. That is a notion that must be challenged, as I will show you. Here's world investment in renewable energy. The latest data point just came out a few weeks ago, to 2018. This is the annual nominal dollars that are being spent globally. You can see the rise to 2010. Keep that in mind. I'm going to show you other charts. And then a gentle fall off, including the most recent data point, which is less than the year prior. So the amount of dollars being spent on renewable energy is actually diminishing, not increasing. Now, the amount of capacity that's being installed is increasing, as I'll show you, because the costs are being cut dramatically, so $1 goes a lot further. But the question is really $300 billion a year significant enough to displace a $6 trillion a year industry? Right? And that's just only one dimension of it. The cumulative amount of spending over the course of the last 20 years, when we see technological change, is just over $4 trillion. Right. Compare that to the world drains an Olympic-sized pool of oil every 14 seconds. 100 million barrels a day is just a staggering amount that is completely unfathomable. I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent, or moralizing up here. I'm just sort of giving you a sense of the scale of the issue. Let's take a look at that graphically. These are our primary energy sources. Each one is a tower chart, 2000 to 2017. Actually, the 2018 data just came out a couple days ago. Coal, we've got rising and then peeling back. The last data point shows yet another rise, 2018 over 17. Contrary to popular belief, coal continues to grow and has been resilient, even though we tried to ban it all the way back 700 years ago. It's the cat with I don't know how many lives. It's very difficult to displace. Oil continues to go up pretty steadily. Natural gas is a high-growth hydrocarbon, cleaner than oil and gas. Nuclear and hydro, generally small. Comparatively, there's the renewables growing exponentially. And it's growing exponentially, as I said, because costs have fallen, so $1 buys you more. But actually, the propensity to want to spend in this space is actually diminishing. We want to understand that as well. Let me stack all those up and show it to you a different way over time. So these are all the primary fuels stacked up, 600 million, I think that's million exajoules. Renewables, hydro, nuclear, natural gas, oil, and coal stacked up. $4.1 trillion spent on that sliver. Effectively, there has been almost no impact on market share. Okay, again, I'm not moralizing on good, bad, or indifferent here. I'm just telling you the way it is. $4.1 trillion has basically made only a small dent. This is not a transition. This is a diversification into renewables. Okay? And I think that we need to understand this, because if we are going to make any sort of difference in reducing emissions, we need to understand that all this talk that we hear with rose-colored glasses about how the world is changing, actually, it's not, really. It's all very notable, but in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of work to do. These are the projections going forward of the International Energy Agency. There are many agencies that are putting forth these sorts of forecasts out to 2040 and beyond. The top line is growth unchecked. The green down to the flat is what we really need to do by virtue of energy efficiency. The green below the white line is what needs to be done to do displacement. Then you have the other ones diminishing underneath, notably oil and coal the most. Okay. This is aspirational if we want to meet the Paris goals. Well, if we only spent $4.1 trillion on the first and the rest of the investment is actually on a decline, how is this achievable? I can give you my own forecast, but that's probably worth a cup of coffee. There's one forecast I can give you with almost 100% certainty. This is not going to happen. Okay. You would have to spend 2 to 3 times as much, and the costs would have to have yet again to come even close to doing this. And importantly, it does not address the biggest thing that most people in this room don't address when they look at deals such as in the energy business, and that is energy is about the way we live, work, and play. It affects absolutely everything. We're trying to displace $6 trillion business. There's big social impacts here. The costs do not include the costs, the social costs of displacing people in a $6 trillion business, and the costs of retiring old infrastructure and so on. Okay, why am I telling you this? Because this is a completely unrealistic scenario. And I wrote a column on this just this week in the Financial Post if you want to go read about it. We need to acknowledge this. We heard the first inconvenient truth in 2007-8. This is the second inconvenient truth. It's not going to happen. So what does need to happen is that Cleantech has to actually act on the entire energy complex. The opportunity is there. And then I think morally there's a big question here. Who will supply whatever oil and gas is produced? And I think John brought about an excellent point. It's not who will supply it, it's who should supply it. Who should supply it ethically and morally should be the cleanest and cheapest barrels on the earth. And we as Canadians should embrace that and strive to achieve that. And I can tell you many companies are moving in that direction. Who should supply it? Who should apply the technology? Okay, what is clean tech? You can look at the definitions. There are many online. Superior performance through technology, all the digital stuff that we talked about, reducing negative ecologic impact in all sorts of industries, steel, aluminum, cement. The definition of clean tech also includes improving the productive use of natural resources. This third category has largely been ignored to this point because the notion has been that everybody is going to be driving an electric car in 10 years. That's why it's been ignored. Necessarily, it's going to have to come back, and it is coming back, if we hope to comply with any sort of emissions targets. Clean tech can also be defined in terms of industrial group, agriculture and food, industrial, materials, resources, transportation, and so on. The ones that are most relevant to energy are energy and power. That's electrification and renewables, resources and environment. That's cleaning up the existing systems. That necessarily has to be part of the mix. Is there money to be made? Well, if you look back historically, here's a histogram of 52 venture funds, venture and private equity funds. The histogram shows that the preponderance of returns around 1.1x, which is hardly enough to induce any sort of risk reward incentive. 94% of these 52 funds delivered less than a 2x. Let's put that over time. The return multiple is on the vertical axis. The horizontal is time. Each dot is a fund. 1x is at the bottom. If you were to draw, I didn't animate it for you, the 2x, you would see that most of them are below 2x. Interesting though, the cluster around 2004 to 2010, especially 07 to 09, that's where a lot of the funds returned either 0x's or things. Why is that? Well, there's a number of reasons, and we have to understand the era prior, which led to all sorts of policy, because policy and environment and energy go together. We did have policy, but it was not necessarily as much environment policy as it was responding to geopolitical issues and peak oil type of scarcity. Let's take a look at policy momentum. I'm using the US as a proxy. We can do this for every country. This is a number of policies that were introduced for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and climate change over time. You can see the exponential increase, sort of circa around 97, all the way culminating to the financial crisis. The financial crisis was a catalyst for policy because it was just immediately after Al Gore's inconvenient truth and the 2007 United Nations report highlighting climate change. And so when the world went to say, how can we stimulate the economy? Oh, we've got a problem with energy environment and energy security. We're going to plow our money into here. So not only did tens of billions of private money go in, but also hundreds of billions of government funding went in, and that had a profound impact. The eras here are what I would call Y2K exuberance as we led into the new thing, and then one of energy scarcity. I'll come back to that. The gray now is the policy count on the right-hand axis, and on the left-hand axis is the amount of private investment dollars, those funds that went in. You can clearly see policy attracts capital, but when the policy falls off, so too does the capital. Right. Now, we're working on the next data point. There is more policy that has been coming in, and the capital's coming back. That's good news and bad news. You don't want companies to be dependent upon policy. Also, there tends to be a rush of capital that comes in and overvalues everything. Too much money for too few deals. But when you do put a lot of money towards something, especially hundreds of billions, things happen. You get the learning curve effects. And there you go. Immediately following that rush of capital, we had battery costs come down, solar costs, LED, wind, and so on. It's quite profound. But if you invested at the top, you lost a lot of money because you were pre-learning curve. So the money that goes in today is the beneficiary of all the spending that has gone on over the course of the last 10 years especially. In that regard, the time is ripe. In the regard of addressing sustainability issues like climate change, the time is right. In regards to costs and being able to compete in a free market sense, the time is right. But autopilot is not just for cars. We tend to forget, and the renewable industry tends to miscalculate, that the incumbent can't innovate. That's the assumption. It's a false assumption, much as it was in 1971 when everybody thought you couldn't clean up smog. There's all sorts of technological things happening, and you're going to hear about some of them today. And that is also a good thing. It's a good thing to clean up the incumbent as well as introduce new systems. And the time is ripe. There are the 4 eras of clean tech investment: Y2K exuberance, energy scarcity, leading to policy, the financial crisis, and learning curve effect. What is the next era? The next era is going to be very interesting. I'm not making any prognostications. I would say that it's been riper than it has been in the 35, not 25 years that I've been in this business. And so, you know, you look at some of the more recent funds, and at least their marks are looking pretty good. We'll see where they end up. Finally, you know, as I said, this movie has been shown many times before, from the 1950s. We have a magazine. Interesting to look inside the car, the Herb-mobile. You know, we have social norms that have changed over time. The technology, in many ways, was not necessarily the problem. I'll reiterate it to you. When you invest in energy, you have to ask yourself, are the social norms changing? I would argue to you that the social norms in our attitudes towards energy consumption, which is where 80% of the emissions are emitted, are not changing very quickly. Let me say that again, you know, in a different way. Fossil fuels don't emit anything. People who burn fossil fuels emit carbon dioxide. And that is an attitude adjustment that has yet had to happen. Let me conclude by saying I do believe we are in an era where finally, in my experience of watching all these different things come and go, fits and starts, the time does appear to be right, but selectivity is paramount. You have to expand your notion of what you think clean tech is. It's not just about solar and wind. It is also about all the technologies in that $6 trillion incumbent, which is just a gigantic pool of opportunity for capital because they are looking for ways and are finally, they too are undergoing an attitude adjustment in terms of, yes, we have to be part of the solution. So there's an investable subset, and within that, the quality growth segments within the subset. And I would echo John's comments earlier that in Canada, we have a high quality subset, and we've got a lot of opportunity to put the money to work in all of our resource-based industries as well. Thank you very much.